Now you're saying that now you're saying you are enforcing remote working. What has happened? The reality is that they deepened their awareness and she made adjustments. So we must also consider the huge demographic shift. There's a huge demographic shift because the 21st century workplace is totally different. I don't have all of the time to expose the context of today, but it's important to be able to say we have to find a way to connect the dots. We are in an era where there is hyper globalization, where in Industry 4.0, like it is always said, there is the evolution of technology. We must also put in perspective multiple generation in the workplace. That one alone is plenty work. Multiple generation. I think I came across a report recently where they were trying to do a demographic analysis. At the moment, 80% of the workforce are Gen Z. That alone is a lot of work. So if we're having conversation around behavioral change in the workforce, we must be able to look at it, in a very holistic way. I like to put it from the helicopter perspective. It says that data says, I just saw it now, Gen Z, the 80% of the workforce, millennials are 50%, Gen X about 31%, the baby boomers I think at about 5%. So there is that very, very broad workforce demographic shifts before. So if you are going to sit on the HR seat and do the job thoroughly, you have to be able to know what is applicable to different, demographic sector that you have or demographic analysis that you have done. Ladies and gentlemen, the 21st century workforce is different, totally different. Is it the hyperpolarization that we will not mention? Is it the evolution of technology? So we must put all of this in perspective, because the workforce now is dealing with so much. What about the VUCA world, a workforce that is volatile, that is uncertain, a workforce that, as all of that, we all need to be able to accept the reality. We need to ask ourselves, how do we build a systematic behavioral change in the workforce? And when we talk about systematic behavioral change, we have to talk about systematic thinking. And systemic thinking attempts to take the perspective of others and to see the circumstances from a vantage point of view. Okay, because you will agree with me that the speed of change is mega. Where we're talking about rapid evolution, not just evolution. So as HR, you have to be able to be ahead of context, because the goalpost begins to shift every time. I think it was James Cartin that said, and I quote, he said, it's hard to imagine the volume of change. It's so hard to imagine. So being systematic requires the ability to think, the ability to conceptualize, the ability to make sense of a challenging situation, especially when you are in driving seat. And this is the concept we have to be in total touch, because every time I go to Google to search for something, I'm even refraining. I was telling one of my staff in the office, I said I'm refraining myself to totally explore chat. I like to call it chat GBT. Because if you're not careful, you'll just find out that you have become so docile. There's nothing that's being done. But that's the reality of technological advancement. So context is changing regularly. So we have to make up our mind that if we will deliver the objective of the business, we must rethink how we manage talent, how we manage resources, how we manage everyone. And one very critical question I always like people to ponder on is, how has these changes affected the workplace? How do we manage multiplicity? There's a huge demographic shift. I saw a data recently also that says that one half of the population, or maybe of the workforce, is under 25 years. Can you beat that? So it's no longer the new normal. It's now the normal. It's no longer the new normal. It's the new normal. This is normal now. because I found out, arguable though, that what matters to generation Z is not totally what matters to the baby boomers. What matters to, in terms of context, in different demographic, analysis that we have in our workplace is not the same. So we got to make up our mind that the dynamics are consistently changing. And the 21st century work environment is totally technology driven. There's diversity of age, diversity of perspective, diversity of background. Now, I'm going through when we're talking about behavioral change, we need to put all of this in perspective, then I will jump into what needs to be done. Diversity of age, diversity of background, all of those things are there. If I call it multiple generation, multiple distraction. The HR lady that I was talking about we're talking about, changing the tone of proposal. And I said to her, I said, in the next 5 years, we will start to do trainings on how to remain focused in the workplace. That's the reality. Because there's this multiple generation with the diversity, there's also the multiple distracted. People are multi-distracted. In fact, let me put it this way, it's a multi-distracted world. But as we begin to look into what we need to do, I have a question for everyone who sits on an HR seat here. And the question is, how easily can your employees express themselves without feeling that a negative implication to the expression? We like to call it psychological safety. How psychologically safe is your own work environment? Now, trust me, as a coach, I'm not going to use the one size fits all. I'm going to deploy some coaching tools to help us be able to unpack this. But before we talk about, driving systemic change, for behavioral, driving systemic behavioral change in the workplace, we need to ask that question. How easily can our employees, express themselves without the feeling that a negative implication to the things that they're doing? Because why change can be challenging to manage at work, is also very necessary for the survival and the advancement of any organization. I mean, a friend of mine called me to join him in having a difficult conversation recently. They had to lay off some of their staff and they needed an external consultant, to ensure that communication is managed well, emotions are managed well. And that's something I'm going to get to in later on. Because accepting change with a positive attitude, usually it's what is needed to help us adapt to the circumstances with less stress, and also to guide whatever it is that can, have a backlash. So it's a question we need to ask before we talk about driving systematic behavioral change. We need to ask what's the psychological state of the work environment. How safe is your environment to be able to drive it? Because your psychological safety quotient will determine how your behavioral change will either be enabled or will be inhibited. Because we have the responsibility to create that. So if it's not there, we will be putting the cart before the horse. I mean, it's difficult to drive change when there's no psychological safety. So, and psychological safety is a combination of both the hard and the soft. So, questions to ask before we even talk about driving systematic behavioral change. Questions we need to ask ourselves is one, how safe is it for people to challenge the status quo? How safe do people feel that, I've not said anything about anyone, how well have we been able to, we talk about, a lot of what HRGM stands for, to be able to influence the workplace. And you see, influence starts from relationship. And you see, being in leadership for about 2 decades, I found out that when relationship is intact, influence is easier. But now, let's just suppose sitting on that very, very difficult seat of HR, you have to give, attend to query, talent management, talent recruitment, talent retention. You will have to develop the ability to have difficult conversations and manage your own, personal bias, manage your own, all of those things have to bring in perspective. So 4 questions I want to ask is when we look at psychological safety of the organization, how safe are people when they have to challenge, the status quo? Now, sometimes arguable. People say things like, oh, if you give room for those kind of things, people can abuse the boundaries. But I think that is all about balance. The balance between empathy and choosing to be vulnerable. The balance between sitting on a punitive seat, also being able to be a good listener, and also being able to empathize with the people that we're leading. All right, so is it safe to challenge the status quo? Because if we're going to drive systematic behavioral change in the workplace, this question has to be asked. Secondly, is it safe, to engage? I mean, those of you who are in HR, you know that Gen Z, they don't send. They're Sorosuke generation. What I will perhaps not be bold enough to say to my superior when I was in corporate world, they will take you up. And once they take you up and you don't make them feel good about what they're saying, they probably will not say anything about anyone anymore. So is it safe, to be able to engage? And when I say engage, you need to unpack that. Engage when it comes to what they think it's not a fair decision made about them. Engage about whether it should be a virtual work or it should be physical work. Then is it safe to learn? Do people feel that if I go for a course and I have to be out of the office for 3 months, will I be able to come back and still meet my role? Then is it safe to collaborate? Is it a hostile environment? Ladies and gentlemen, these answers will determine how realistic behavioral change will be. I mean, I have a number of HR people that are my friends, and I always tell them, the future of work must put psychological safety in perspective. And when there's psychological safety, what I found out that employees are less stressed, they're more engaging, they're willing to even be influenced for a better objective. So we've got to learn to answer those questions thoroughly and sincerely, because to improve is to change. And you see, when we say we want to change, it means that we will have very unpleasant conversation. And you see, the next thing to do when we answer those questions is to begin to ask ourselves, what is the role of leadership? I mean, I've been a part of many teams. I have also led teams to do culture change. And I must tell you that the African mindsets, set into intervention. The African leadership, majority of the African leadership feels that is the people beneath them that need the required change. I mean, I've been a part of a culture change where we had deployed questionnaires. We're done for middle level management, we're done for entry level, we're done for. Then it became doing for senior management, and they just were so invasive. And I had to say to the HR manager, I said, if you don't elicit certain things from the leadership, it's going to be difficult. Many years ago, also, I'd followed one of my mentors to Dubai to do a culture change, strategy session with people from, I won't mention the organization. And by the time we got to Dubai, we found out after we did the pleasantries, we did tea break. By 12, when we did the tea break, the class was empty. I thought they would be back by 1, as the as the training coordinator. And unfortunately, I didn't have the Dubai numbers. The Nigerian numbers were not going. So I was forced to call, the HR manager back in Nigeria. And I was like, man, we can't find the participants. She laughed me to scorn. She chuckled and she said, oh, is it my first time? And I said, yes, well, it's my first time with the organization. He said, well, the purpose of the training is not learning. He says that code. Wow, it was a culture shock. And yet they had allocated a few millions of naira for the culture change. I mean, some of you who are, listening to me can relate to that. Because change hurts. It makes people feel insecure. It makes people feel confused. It makes people feel hungry. People want things to be the same as they've always been because think when things are the same, it makes life easier. But you will agree with me that if you're a leader, if you're an HR manager, you can't let your people hang on to the past. I mean, it's just doesn't work. Because I think it was Maya Angelou that says that if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude towards it. But all of this in the plate of an HR manager, it's important that the required change must be a blend of your thoughts, your emotions, in a way that you are taking optimal decisions. Sadly, if the top leadership is not involved, I can tell you it's dead on arrival, because there are what we call culture ambassadors, people who will champion the new culture. Because really and truly, if you go to drill a little deeper, when we talk about systematic behavioral change, we're really talking about culture change, ask me. So the people that has to champion the culture change must be the top management. Okay, the full soldiers have to be the managers who will be able to, drive the conversation from emails to, non-verbal cues and all of that. So as I begin to get deep into it, I want you to please know that culture change, behavioral change requires having unpleasant, or let me say difficult conversations with different people across board. And for you to be able to have difficult conversations, you must also be able to put a few emotional intelligence nuggets into perspective, because it's about being aware, it's about being intentional, it's about being purposeful, it's about being able to recognize your own personal bias. I mean, in behavioral change, I usually like to recommend, there must be a few scapegoats. I mean, in culture change, so that you can send a signal across board that, certain things has to change. So if we're going to have culture change or behavioral change, depending on whatever you want to hang on, it's about having that conversation. And I said, difficult conversation with your employees or the people that you have the privilege to oversee requires blending your thoughts, your emotions, and your words in a way that you are taking optimal decision. It's about being aware. It's about being intentional. It's about being purposeful. I want that to sink. And you see, conversations that has to do with dealing with challenging issues, dealing with disagreement, dealing with unpleasant feedback, high-level confrontations, But a few things that we have to also bring to perspective. We must be aware of our own personal bias. So I have done a core value intervention program for a particular organization before, named with, and one of the things I found out was that a couple of people who were meant to be culture ambassadors were violating the culture. So it became, the drug that you badly want to give us, you need to first take it. So if we're going to be able to drive conversations around behavioral change, we have to first be able to deal with or be able to upscale or learn about how our emotions can get in the way. Because when we know and aware of how our non-verbal cues, how our personal bias can get into that interaction, and then we have to step back a bit and look at our communication style, okay, and be able to find the balance between being aggressive, passive, have the conversation, being able to find, the ability to self-manage yourself such that you explore the options available to you, so that by that you are choosing how you want to be seen. I mean, you would agree with me that many people on the HR set, by many arguable, conversations, they're not many people's friends. Now, but I believe that that's one of the reasons why HR Gen has come together to be able to stop. I like what Lara said, stop that toxic behavior. I went to Ibadan recently to do a training for an organization, and the way the HR guy was talking to people that came to our office, I was like, wow, I don't need to deploy the assessment. This is all I could elicit that this is a toxic environment, very, very toxic. So finally, because I don't like the one size fits all, I believe that as a certified coach, I need to help people deploy questions that will help them find out around the questions I've asked. I'll probably just, ask a few other questions. So there's one of the good, and there are people here who are also certified coaches. There's one of the tools I like to use that's helped me simplify the outcomes that people will have. So for the behavioral change, I need you to, let's deploy the GROW model, okay? Because leaders and HR managers need to ask the question that focus on, the goals that you want to achieve. So the first thing is, if you want systematic behavioral change, what's the goal that you want to achieve? Because that goal will drive a number of other things. The R, because of time, you've got to be able to look at the R. So R in the GROW represent the reality on the current reality of the situation, with the energy of the leadership, whether they have the political will to make the change, whether there is the sync between the leadership, the middle level management, and all of that. So what's the reality check? Is it the right time? R talks about the reality check, talks about the right timing, because I've seen HR deploy an intervention, right intervention with the wrong timing. There are a number of things that have to be put in perspective. So these questions help you to, gain awareness of what needs improvement. What do we want to improve? When we set the goal, then what do we need to improve? Represent the options, which refers to the possible solutions that the management can help implement to support improvement, to support the success, to support, how the HR team can maximize employee productivity. So what are the options, without your own personal bias, because you're also human. Then the W talks about what's the way forward, which represent the next step of action that HR needs to take to achieve this goal. Now, that's a way to drive conversation around behavioral change. Because if we don't look at it from, personalizing the different dynamics in different organizations, we probably will just approach it, from a one-size-fits-all. And there's nothing called a one-size-fits-all. Everyone needs to be able to sit down and find what is peculiar to the behavioral change that, they don't want to, persist. Because getting over painful experience is much like, like I like to put it this way, crossing monkey bars. You have to let go at some point in order to move forward. So there are, when you do drive, the energy around behavioral change or culture change, the reality is that you will need to have painful conversations that can lead to painful experiences. And the only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, to be able to move with it and, I like to put it this way, join the dance. So yes, people will resist change, but when you are able to look at some of the things that I mentioned earlier, which is being able to have the blend of how your thoughts, your emotions, and your behavior, can help you take optimal decisions around what is required, then you can jump on it. Because yes, change will not come if we wait for some other persons or some other time. As HR people, we're the ones that we've been assigned to be able to drive the change. The question is, how you drive change will be a function of how emotionally intelligent you are. Because everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing themselves. Okay? And as I begin to round up, finally, if we're going to drive systematic organizational behavioral change, we must make up our mind to change our perspectives, or to be willing to move perspectives, to ensure that we have a buy-in from management. We must be willing to, I like to call it you take a turbulent journey. It's going to be turbulent. Some people will not greet you. Some people will, you see reading in between the line, and you see emails flying as if, things are going to come to an end. But the reality is that the companies that change may survive, but the companies that transform will thrive. That's one thing I always like to say. when I speak to HR, and I'm going to run through that again, the companies that change may survive, but the companies that transform will thrive, because change brings incremental or small scale adaptations, while transformation brings great improvements, that ripple through the future of an organization. I think I've exceeded my time. Thank you so much, Lara. So much energy when I talk about change in the workplace. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
I think you have two gadgets by each other to switch on one.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you very much, Dr. Tunji. Thank you so much. That was really, really insightful. Sincerely, I wish all my HR colleagues were here and all of my HR friends. I wish they were all here to listen to this insightful session you just shared. And a whole lot, like you shared, starts with the individual, starts with the culture of the individual, having to transform yourself first as a person before it translates to others or the organization in a whole. All right, thank you very, very much. So we'll be taking up questions now. So please, if you have any question, could raise your hand to ask, or you could just drop your questions in the chat box. Okay, so I have a question.
Please go ahead.
So
I guess you also have a network.
You have both in terms of, sir?
I guess you went off at a time. I said maybe you're also experiencing network issues.
Oh, yes, I am.
Okay.
Well, I'll just try to recap. Can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, if you're in an environment where you have superiors, people that are older than you age-wise and experience-wise, and you notice the culture, that the culture is actually not healthy. But then we all know that the change has to start from management. How do you, as a younger one or a Gen Z, how do you even drive change from your own end if the change is not forthcoming from the management? And how can you avoid that influence rubbing off on you? Because you might think that, oh, I don't want to be like this person, or I don't want to be like this boss. But the more you stay around an environment, it begins to rub off on your attitude unconsciously. So firstly, how do the person influence or create that change from their point of view? And how do the person avoid getting influenced by the same culture is not happy with? Thank you, sir.
Okay. So going from toxic to healthy, culture can improve. Yeah, we all know it can improve employee morale, retention, boost companies' reputation. But the reality is the champions and the drivers of culture are the people in leadership. Now, as long as you're in that organization, is not in your JD, or is not in your capacity to improve the culture. And this is always what I say to people: when you are in an environment when the culture is toxic, or the culture perhaps begins to don't align with your values, you must learn to manage, you deploy your hearing, your listening. So how do I mean? So there's certain people that are just champions of the toxic work culture. Some people can isolate themselves, and that requires a level of awareness. But I found out that some people are just there, and once they see something bad, they latch in on it. So the question I ask is, first and foremost, is this in alignment with your values? Is it violating your values? If they're violating your values, you probably need to begin to ask, can you manage emotions such that it doesn't affect your performance? Because you might not be able to change the culture, but you can change your attitudes to the culture. All right. I mean, recently I still had to counsel a protege who is in a terrible work environment culture. And her husband said to me that she began to forget things. She was having dementia. So by the time I sat down with her in a therapy session, I found out that, the backlashing, the name calling affected her esteem. And I said, you have a choice, either to hold on to the job and lose your esteem, or to leave and, improve your esteem. So it's not just about the culture, it's also about developing the emotional intelligence to be able to know exactly how to manage your emotions and how to, determine how you will manage the people champions of such culture. But ultimately, if you live there for another place, I can tell you that, I mean, it's, Lara will agree with me, and maybe some of the HR senior people here, it's just almost a different flavor of, leadership issues from one organization to another. So, summary, if you can't change the culture, but you can change your attitude to the culture while you use what you have to ensure that you maximize your productivity and your performance, whatever you do. My candid opinion.
Okay, thank you very, very much, sir. Thank you so much. So from what you said, it means that I have to focus on my attitude towards the environment and see how I can change my response towards the feedback or the culture of the organization. All right, thank you very much, sir. We'll be taking another question.
Please asked, I want to reiterate the last quote. Someone said, someone was asking about the last quote, and I said, companies that change may survive, but companies that transform will thrive. Change brings incremental or small scale adaptations, while transformation brings great improvements that ripple through the future of an organization. I hope the person got that quote now. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sir. I think the person got it now. I think I missed the question from Lady Gwen. I switched from my phone to my laptop, so I think the message
Okay, let me
wiped.
check. Let me let me run through it. Yeah, when a management or employee says to the staff to speak up their mind freely, and after speaking up, the particular staff is misjudged, therefore promised to be silent in future meetings, what advice do you have for such a staff? Well, that's why I said mention those questions earlier. Majority of organizations don't have psychological safety. It's not even and once you're in that kind of an environment, you have to deploy tact. So it's not an environment where you can express yourself without negative consequences, or without the fear of being judged. So once that is the reality, you have to do, number one, you deepen your awareness about what is happening. Number two, you have to be tactical. You have to say the truth, subjective to. But let me put it this way. This is the way one of my mentors put it. If you are in that environment, you have to move from right and wrong to be doing the. Now, is it right to speak at a certain meeting where you feel the right of maybe some set of employees are violated? Is it right? Yes. Is it wrong to be quiet? No. Is it needful at that time? So you've got to be able to go beyond right and wrong. And that's the energy around diplomacy, to not just looking at situations from this is right, this is wrong, to coming to terms that it's needful to be quiet. At this point, is needful, because the toxic environment does not even encourage collaboration. It doesn't encourage teamwork. You are not safe to challenge what is being said. You're not safe to engage. You're not safe to, so yeah. Once you decide you want to be there, you have to make up your mind to do tact, diplomacy, so that you don't say the right thing at the wrong time or with the wrong tone or to the wrong set of people, so that it's not being used against you. I hope I was able to answer your question.
Okay, thank you so much. So someone has a question. How do one manage a member of the management team that believes his own opinion is the best? And then second question, said this is affecting the productivity level of his team, even to the point of resigning.
So Lara, please answer that question. I know it's a seat that you have sat on several times. Lara, are you there?
Doc, I'm here. Okay,
It's a symposium discussion.
Yeah. So let me respond to that question with a personal experience. So I used to work with a boss, a female boss, many years ago, who believed that it's only our opinion that counts, right? And I remember there was a time I traveled to South Africa during one of my design thinking trainings, and I asked the coach then in South Africa that how do you, when you have a boss who doesn't listen to you and believe it's only their own views that count, so how do you manage such bosses? The coach then in South Africa gave me a response that has worked for me since then, many years ago. What was the response? She said, you use tact and questioning skills, because one, such people are very egoistic. They only believe it's their views that count. They believe they're the only ones that knows it all. So you use questioning, such as you ask them, what do you think? What if we do it this way? What are your views if you do it? So by the time you are using the questioning technique to get them to rethink and reshift and review their own thoughts and response, it gives more room for them to start start seeing things from your own view. So my response to that person is use the questioning technique or the questioning tactic to have conversations or to drive your views with such people. They don't like to be told, because most people in that category are usually very egoistic. But when you ask questions, when you present your thought in form of a question, it gets them to think, and see things differently. So that has worked for me. And I think that person should adopt that approach of asking them, so what do you think? What if we do it the other way? What are your views? So you're asking them, so you're giving your view in form of a question to them to get them to think, and you're asking them and they're thinking and responding. That has always worked. So that might be a good way to relate to such people. Thank you. Okay. Coach TJ.
Thank you so
much. Yeah, all right.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if Coach TJ has anything to add to that.
Okay.
Well, so I mean, I think that a lot of people need to come to terms that being an African leader comes with being egoistic. And you see another sign of ego in relating with people, I mean, that are in leadership and are very egoistic is jealousy. It's not usually the feeling of jealousy and protectiveness that spring up, whenever something you perceive as a threat to the relationship. This kind of jealousy for people who are egoistic usually are unfounded, with sometimes a very unpleasant way to look at it. Why am I coming from this perspective? You also need to be careful, who you talk to. Because in the midst of trying to find out solution, if they find out that you have gone to talk to someone else about it, they can also begin to feel jealous. And the truth is, being ego is just another way to say that someone is dealing with low self-esteem. So before challenges come in, you also need to learn to fill the emotional bank. Because when we talk about pride and ego and arrogance, it's one of the biggest ego problems in the workplace. And one of the standard expression of ego in the workplace is pride, flat out self-centeredness. So the thing about it is that if you learn to fill the emotional bank account, you can develop a relationship such that if it's necessary after using questions to also come in a suggestive way, okay? Especially even when they ask you to go and do a task, you make sure that you are not, telling them what to do, even though they ask you to tell them. Your tone has to be suggestive. Things like, I think that I will suggest that we, do it this way, but it's subjective to your approval. Because you can't just help them. It's even worse when they're now narcissists. And we have those in the workplace, narcissist tendencies. I was at a meeting where someone asked, so how do we put work-life balance in perspective? Guess what the MD said? He said, I pretend I did not hear that question. I mean, that's already, telling you that there's no empathy, and you just got to manage what is there, sadly. So that's what I think. And also to be able to scale up your emotional intelligence, using that data to form decision, lowering your expectation, because in the workplace, because you have expectation that there's a long degree like the thermometer in front of your MDCU or the person that we're talking about. But behavioral issues and academic qualification, they're so parallel. I've met professors who are, for a want of word, they have confident ignorance. They're displaying foolishness without even acknowledging or knowing it. So God will give you the wisdom to handle the terrain. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at the chat box, if there are any other questions. So I would love to ask, sir. So how do I drive? I know I can't change the leadership, right? But I know I'm going to be a leader someday. So how do I even start from my circle? Let's say for my team, for my colleagues. How do I, drive or be an example of the kind of change I would love to see in the organization? How do I influence my colleagues, my, subordinates, those below me? What do I need to start doing differently?
Okay, thank you so very much. So the first thing is to even be able to introspect and be aware of the baggage you also brought to the workplace. Because being an example is like being a benchmark, and you must understand that you can be a good person, but you can never be a perfect person, right? Because many people come into the workplace with a lot of energy, they want to achieve this, and they forget that they also have a history. So the first thing is to be aware, of, maybe do a SWOT analysis, I'll put it that way. Know what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, know what are your threats. Now that awareness will now drive how you are going to manage your own, energy, such that you will, the times that you are going to drop the ball, you'll be conscious. Because one thing I found in the workplace, especially for people who want to champion things, is you want to do stuff, and when you don't get it done, you are in denial. So you have to first be able to admit that you're a human. Because really and truly, we need people like you in the workplace, because when you have that understanding, you bring fresh perspective, new ideas to an organization, and so all of that will provide opportunity for a new direction, especially depending on how flexible the leadership and management is. So change requires first being aware, then two, use that data to work on your skill gaps, your knowledge gaps, and the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to do your best while you also improve. Because, culture change refers to changes in the way the work is done. You see, and how employees interact and engage with each other. So also you need to know that you don't have access over the whole organization. You can only influence a small circle, people that relate with you, because there is diversity. You have to put in perspective when you look at it on a broader scale. You have to look at diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, among many other things. And you see, you just must make up your mind to be a positive change among your immediate circle, such that you don't burn out too fast, and then you're not doing, the right thing from people that will not even be able to see the good that you're doing in the first place. Because I'm sure you know that some people, no matter how much you do, because of their personal bias, they just will not be able to see that positive. So yeah, you got to take it easy. You have to manage your expectation, because even some of the people that are in your circle, they could be conniving with people who are violators of the organizational culture, values, and mission statement. So it's a very muddy water to tread. You have to take a step, look around, and be sure, that you are not stepping beyond the bandwidth of what your capacity can carry, because change in the workplace, it's a lot of work. So finally, just your circle, whatever you can do with your circle, make up your mind that you are truthful to your values, you are truthful to your beliefs, and also you need to be diplomatic and tactical. In an environment where the environment is toxic or the culture is toxic, and where there's no psychological safety, you have to be tactical and be diplomatic, so that in the quest of now trying to influence people for good, you are not seen as too no or over savvy, that can now be counterproductive for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That's really, really helpful and insightful. So I'm still looking at the chat box. I think I have one final question, sir.
Okay.
It's more like your counsel to, in quotes, to the Gen Zs. We come into the
Yeah.
workplace with so much energy, add value. We want to learn, we want to interact with people, we want to meet people, we just want to, make a really, really great thing out of this whole career journey. And then you come into this organization and you meet the older ones, the people that have stayed there for 5 years, 10 years, and the energy they assume can be so demoralizing and discouraging. Bring, like, they are coming off with this negative energy. How do I even make progress in this place? And the temptation to wanting to leave the organization start coming to this person's mind. So what's your counsel to us, the younger ones, the young professionals, the upcoming leaders? How do we manage this diversity in terms of the people ahead of us that are not helping matters in terms of their disposition?
Okay, thank you so very much. So when we talk about this, we have to talk about the future of work, really. And as we draw insight from the preferences and the behaviors of our newest generation entering the workplace, we need to also look at how work itself is changing and evolving. The new realities produced by these forces of change present us with complex questions to consider, including, when I was doing my presentation, I mentioned the fact that we have a multiple generation with multiple distraction. So for Gen Zs, I think it's important for you to deliberately take a journey of emotional intelligence, because there are Gen Zs who honestly, they have the right intention, but they often have the wrong approach. And nobody your KPI is not a function of your intention. Your KPI is a function of your approach. So my counsel to Gen Z most time is, take a course on emotional intelligence. It's all about, beyond the fact that, we're, being the light on Gen Zs, we must also be able to say to them that every human being has emotions, and you can either be a slave of your emotions or being a master of your emotion. So what I recommend is take a long dive into emotional intelligence so you can understand the four components, which is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, social management. That will help, because while you have the right energy, you have the right intention, you also be able to drive it with the right approach. I mean, I've had training with Gen Zs, and this question has come again and again. And I say to them, yes, you need to align the right intention with the right approach, all right? The right energy with the right approach, such that whatever intention you have, which will ultimately benefit the organization, will not now be seen as counterproductive, because not many organizations are willing to, adapt. And part of the traits of Gen Z is the ability to be expressive. They have preference for traditional communication. They desire to work individually, so it becomes a struggle to collaborate. They're mobile. They're motivated by stability. They're naturally competitive. All of this, I can pack it into a bucket, which is emotions regulation. When you are emotionally intelligent, and as you take that journey, you'll find out that your ability to, be intentional with your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior will help you to savour, the traditional communication, and also gradually infuse your own preference, without hurting what is existing. So it's about, for me, emotional intelligence, the ability to regulate it. I'm using, most employers are already very familiar with millennials, or maybe most is exaggerated, a few. But you see, some Gen Z will represent a large portion of the workforce in the nearest future. So understanding this new generational traits and preferences will help, everyone to create a culture that plays to their strength, also for the Gen Zs to now be able to align with the strength of the organization, to ensure that while they're communicating the truth, they're not shattering the table, because they say that it takes adults to bring, or baby boomers to bring stability to the organization. It takes Gen Z and Gen X to bring mobility. So we need the both of stability and mobility. And it's all about collaboration, and it's all about inclusiveness, diversity, and the ability to accommodate, other people's perspective while we make decisions that are optimal for the organization. That's my candid opinion.
All right, thank you so much, sir.
Pleasure is all mine.
Your counsel is well noted. And big question, Ibiko Olua, please, you could unmute and ask your questions.
Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you so much, Dr. Tunji. So I was actually going to add to Joy's question the other time. It's all about the senior colleagues who have been in the complaint before you, and they exhibit some traits sometimes that are not really, say, encouraging to the culture. So, for instance, the management actually sent an email saying why people are on leave. They should actually enjoy their leave, and they are very much in support of a work-life balance and people getting to unwind during leave and getting refreshed when they come on board, when they come back to work. And then the next stage, this particular senior colleague is telling you that that people on leave, their leave was approved based on their performance will not be affected. And do you actually know that their performance is actually linked to their commission and everything? And this doesn't really speak well to work-life balance. That is just an example. This particular senior colleague actually kind of shouts at junior colleagues sometimes, saying, "Don't you want to make money?" Something like that. Like, it is not all time toxic or shouting out or demoralizing others. She has a good part as well. But how do you come into the place? How do you come into the workplace and try to let this person say that this is not good? There is actually a better way of approaching the matter and situation. And the person has been in the company way longer than you. The thing that's been working, this particular approach I've been working for this senior colleague for a while. But then here you are thinking there's a better way of doing that. So I think I would just go with your advice of emotional intelligence and improving my approach. So thank you so much. I don't know if there's anything to add to it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I just
So just let me help you add to that. Now, one of the things that you need to also put in, I will beam the light on a part of emotional intelligence, which is expectation management. Because establishing workplace expectations, I found out they usually help align your professional goals with your abilities, and they create more trusting professional relationship with your co-workers or superior supervisors. So through expectation, you can help establish boundaries, as you interact, set goals, and more about those with whom you interact. Because managing expectation at work may also be important to help create a positive, healthy work environment where you can thrive and increase your own skills. So it's about expectation management at work. Once you are aware of the kind of environment you're in, managing expectation at that work environment now refers to the method you're going to deploy, to be able to create your own personal guidelines, because managing expectation is very important so that you don't consistently get on the edge. Your emotions are, troubled. You begin to drop the ball. Your performance is affected. So also when you understand the place of expectation management, it will provide you insight, because expectations may oftentimes help you offer greater insight into whatever it is that different people are doing and how you have been able to bucket them and say, okay, for this person, I need to manage my expectation about this person is a perpetual liar. I need to be able to manage expectation about this. Then you see also it's good to set realistic goals, because expectations may help you establish realistic goals for yourself, for your team, and by creating expectations that align with your skill set, you find out that you can identify achievable project milestones, regardless of who should give you the moral support and who has shown not to be there. So once you get in an organization, or for you as an example that you're in that organization, you got to wear your expectation management hat such that you will manage your expectation. And why are we hurt? Why are we hurt in the workplace? Because people don't meet up to our expectation. So there's some people that put them on level 6, you scale them down to level 2 so that whatever they do doesn't shock you again. So you can even move on and not allow that become an emotional bullet that can make you drop the ball as you deliver the values required. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tunji. I think we'll begin to wrap up at this point. I have one final question. A friend sent in this. So she's asking that, what if you notice a culture or a what will I call it? Like I won't term it a culture yet, but a threat amongst your colleagues. So she was explaining that a particular vendor that they patronize came to collect his payment, and in the course of paying, the man offered her a certain amount of that money as cash, just a means of saying thank you, those kind of things. And she declined because she felt uncomfortable with, why are you giving me gifts? I'm just doing my job and I'm paying you for your job as well, you know. So she's thinking that it's possible that maybe that's the maybe the man has been doing that with other people, and I'm just not, this is not, I'm not there, so I don't know the full gist. But she just felt, it's unusual. I can't collect this money. Thank you very much, sir. I will always patronize you, but you don't have to give me this as a means of appreciation and all, And you would probably also observe that staff are also collecting gifts for clear policy that restricts or prohibits that. But you know that these kinds of things, if there are no checks and balances, it could escalate to something else, and people take advantage and abuse all of these things. So in this kind of situation where you're observing certain traits, certain kinds of pattern amongst your colleague or amongst vendors that work with your organization, but there's no clear policy to address such, what do you do, sir?
Thank you so very much. So very simple. If they're doing things
Or what?
against the values of the organization, that's who they are. Don't let them change who you are. Now, for me, she just has chosen to uphold our personal values in alignment with organizational values, because organizational values are a set of core beliefs held by an organization. I mean, they act as a guide or principles that organization with purpose and direction, and that sets the tone for your interaction with customers, with stakeholders, with vendors, with employees. So you've got to learn to be true to your values. Yes, I know that some people do it and they get away with it, but my simple counsel, if people do it and you notice it, that's who they are. Be true to your own self, okay? Don't let their bad behavior change your core value, your personal values that you have held so dearly. That's sincerely my honest opinion. Joy, are you there?
Okay, all right. Thank you very, very much. I think my network affected.
Yeah, network has been
Thank you so
crappy.
much, sir. I think we'll be wrapping at this point.
Thank you for having me, HR Gem. I
Yes. So,
look
sir,
forward
yes, sir, we look forward to more interactive sessions with you. So, sir, do you have any parting words, final words,
So first and foremost, I want to thank the HR Gem for having me. I don't take it for granted at all. What are my parting words? I'm always quick to say that wherever you do, whatever you do, wherever you're doing it, make sure that you are not stagnant. Make sure that your mantra is continuous improvement, because for you to consistently bring value, you have to commit to consistent improvement. So you've got to learn to be passionate. Perhaps I would say let your goal be to be a 7-star worker. You know, a 7-star worker who is passionate about learning and keeps learning. You know, a 7-star worker is willing to collaborate, has the right attitude, who is curious to learn, you know, and who is desirable for everyone to have in their team going forward. So yeah, my encouragement is commit to continuous improvement, because if you learn more, you will earn a lot more. Thank you, and do have an amazing evening.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. God bless you. All right, so I'll be calling on one of the gems to give us a vote of thanks. All right. Gem Felicita, please could you unmute and give the vote of thanks? Okay, seems she's unavailable.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Good evening.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, Joy, this is really like a spotlight. Like you actually put me on the spot. I wasn't expecting it anyways. Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining in. It was really an insightful session, sir. I must commend. I learned a whole lot, and of course, we are all in the process of learning and growing every day. So, thank you so much to everyone for joining in. For Madam Lara, thank you for putting this together. Actually done with a summit, a leadership summit, and I'm joining in on this already, and I feel so overwhelmed already with knowledge. And thank you everyone for joining in. It's really been amazing. Joy, honorable moderator, thank you. And one thing I would just like to add is the workplace, there should be mutual respect, just like what I learned today from the leadership summit that I attended, that we should learn to have mutual respect amongst ourselves in the workspace. We shouldn't say, okay, because this person is of a junior colleague or something, we should try to look down on them. We can have people with low value and low influence, and of course they are the backbone in the organizations. So wait for the box down there. I don't really, this place is kind of noisy because I need to stay back to joining the session. Yes, so thank you very much, Dr. Tunji, Babajide. I look forward to meeting you physically one day to learn more and to learn more from you, sir. Thank you so much. Madam Lara, thank you very much, ma, for putting this together. I really do appreciate. I've gained a lot, and I hope everyone also has actually learned one or two things, and all our questions have been answered for us to do better in our workplace, because that's one of the core values of the HR gems. We can't give to people what we do not have, so we have to fill ourselves up first before we can, pour out from our cup to people. So thank you so much, everyone. Do have a lovely
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Jide. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. I believe everyone has gotten one gem or the other from today's session. I wish you all the very best. Thank you. Thank you, Coach TJ, for your time. Thank you, everyone. God bless you and have an amazing weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.